Of course, this morning we're just going to first kind of give an overall understanding of what, if you all heard the word or heard the acronym NPDES before. So we're going to talk about that and the CWA and how they affect your site. Overview, what we're going to talk about first is we're going to kind of talk about kind of history of water quality, just a quick one, and then the evolution of the NPDES permit, and then we're going to talk about non-point source runoff, and then we're going to talk about the effects of sediment. So history of water quality, believe it or not, back in 1899, the Rivers and Harbors Act made it illegal to discharge refuse matter into navigable waterways, and that was actually administered by the Army Corps of Engineers way back then. And so just kind of through history, a lot of things happened, of course, between 1899 and 1960, some small acts here and there, but kind of the environmental issues kind of culminated all together in the 1960s with what we had. We had some fish kills, some closed beaches, contaminated water supplies, and if you all ever remember, I guess, some pictures of Cuyahoga River, which caught on fire, which was a big deal. It had caught on fire many times over the years, but it was just, in 1969, it kind of seemed to be the push that culminated in the Clean Water Act, and which is the CWA. Most people, the acronym that they use for it is CWA. So in 1972, the Clean Water Act kind of had three goals. It established goals for eliminating high amounts of toxic chemicals and other pollutions from waterways. It established the water standards to protect and rehabilitate rivers for sports and recreation. And third, it established the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. So the question is, okay, so the EPA was made by the Clean Water Act of 1972, so exactly how are they going to enforce clean water? And what the EPA came up with was the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System, or otherwise known as NPDES. And pretty well what that allowed is it made industrial, agriculture, and municipal facilities have a discharge permit, in which case they had to explain, how much they are going to be releasing off the site, how many discharges they actually have on site, and then what kind of chemicals they are going to discharge. So that pretty well, all different, as I said, industrial, agriculture, and municipal facilities had to have this permit that showed that information. But if you think about, I guess the question is, what about all the other pollutions? They pretty well call those point source pollution, right? Because they all come out of a pipe pretty well. But there's a whole other type of pollution called non-point source pollution. And so studies in the late 70s and 80s basically showed that the majority of pollution that we had here in the United States actually came from non-point source. And I'm going to go into these in a little more detail a little later on, but just really quickly, industrial stormwater runoff, fertilizers, herbicides, and insecticides. You also had oil and grease and toxic chemicals from urban runoff, salt from irrigation, bacteria, nutrients from pet waste, livestock, sewer, septic, all those things. And then, of course, sediment from improperly managed construction sites and crop and forest lands and just eroding stream banks. So once they found out in the 70s and 80s, hey, that NPDES permit that was in 1972 really didn't quite hack it all, they added the Water Quality Act of 1987, which added municipal separate storm sewer system, or MS4s. And then it also industrial stormwater dischargers. And that's kind of why we're all here. We have unincorporated Jefferson County, Birmingham, all have NPDES permit. And so, and here in Alabama, in 1995, the Alabama legislature actually finally established a stormwater program. And then in 1997, the Stormwater Management Authority Incorporated was formed. And then October 1 of 2009, Stormwater Management Authority partnered with Jefferson County Department of Health to provide stormwater services. And then the cities of Birmingham, Bessemer, Graysville, Fultondale, Hoover, and unincorporated Jefferson County all formed their stormwater programs. So that kind of gives you a history of where we are up to this point. So kind of back to that question, since we all have this, we have this NPDES permit given to the municipalities about non-point source pollution. What is non-point source pollution? it's, I guess it's kind of self-explanatory. It's just diffuse pollution versus a point source. It's as easy as that. Non-point source is diffuse. So the first pollutant that kind of mentions that we were supposed to clean up as an NPDES permit is fertilizers, herbicides, and insecticides from agricultural and residential area. You know, these basically run off yards in addition to agriculture areas when it rains really hard, and can cause basically a huge nutrient load in the creeks and such, which can end up causing fish kills and basically hurt the overall life in a stream. Salt from irrigation, I didn't quite understand how that can happen, but I learned basically apparently when you irrigate, you end up, there's always salt in the water, and it ends up just accumulating in this because plants don't take up the salt. So just that salt slowly accumulates in the soil and can cause runoff, and we all know that salt's not a good thing for growing plants in. Another non-point source is oil and grease and toxic chemicals from urban runoff. And that's just as easy as cars, oil and grease, oil that kind of drips out from your car, little spilt gas, of course petrol, all like asphalt, things like that, they kind of leach a little bit of the petroleum products. And this little schematic here shows you, you know, in a usual nice forest, when it rains, you have about 10% runoff of water, only 10% water leaves. But when you're in an urban environment, you have 55% runoff. So basically in our cities, you end up with, you know, 5 times the amount of water runoff, which that's where all those chemicals get, you know, taken by that water running off the streets, and it goes into storm drains and goes into the creeks. And another one is non-point source pollution is, of course, you have bacteria and nutrients from livestock, pet waste, and sewer and septic tanks. You see that, I think there's a city that do your duty, which I thought was pretty funny. And then down in the bottom, you have a picture there of kind of livestock, kind of runoff that can happen from livestock. And again, that causes just that livestock and, I mean, the bacteria and nutrients that comes out of livestock and overall kind of waste, animal waste, can cause, again, kind of a huge nutrient load in the water, which can then cause problems for fish and different animals that live within a creek. And the last one, of course, is sediment. So you can see here, that's a site there that's kind of underwater. And then down below, you can kind of see a construction site there where the water's kind of pouring over the side of the silt fence there. So sediment can come from, of course, construction sites, kind of while we're here, and crops and forest lands. It comes off crops and forest lands. Just, you know, crop, since you have a lot of soil that doesn't have vegetation all on it when it rains, you got soil runoff there. Forest lands, you know, if it's same thing, if there's not as much vegetation as you wish on that, and it's a really hard rain, you're going to lose some sediment and dirt. So the question is, what does sediment do? So to begin with, first off, on the infrastructure side, you have it clogs storm drain systems, causes flooding. We have property damage, you know, safety issues. We've all, I don't know if you've seen, you know, different sites where I guess it ends up before they even kind of sometimes finish building, there's lots of sediment within the storm drain. So later on, you know, when it rains really hard and people moved in, that can cause some flooding problems. Of course, you have cleanup is expensive to municipalities and to the individual property owners. So that's kind of the part of the infrastructure. And then as far as on the biological side, it does various effects to the aquatic life. So basically what dirt does is, you know, we all know when we breathe smoke and stuff, it makes it hard for us to breathe. But for fish, it's when you have sediment in the water, it's hard for them to breathe. It gets in their gills. And how many of y'all like to fish? Nobody likes to fish? Okay. A few people like to fish? All right. So if y'all like bass and trout, how do they hunt? They're visual hunters, right? That's how they eat. They're predatory visual hunters. And when you have sediment, a big sediment load in the water, they can't see. They can't see what they're hunting for. So you end up getting the scrawny fish. Nobody likes scrawny fish, right? So, and then you have the fish, and due to that, sometimes you have fish kills. So basically, a lot of that sediment, what ends up happening is it ends up getting in the bottom of the creek, causing, basically kind of hurting some of the smaller insects, and that works its way up all the way up the food chain, in addition to causing some trouble to the visual hunters, the fish we like to catch. So the question is, what is my responsibility? And that's why we're here. We're talking about best management practices in order to stop some of that sediment from leaving sites. That's why we're here today. So that's it for me. If there's any questions.